Hey, I love that intro. Hello and welcome to TalkPAD once again, where, of course, we talk positively about dyslexia with interesting people. And I am, of course, joined as always by the illustrious duo, Jamie and Charlotte, who are looking composed in their new location, calm and resplendent in anticipation of their journey to Everest shortly. Hopefully, they will be appropriately dressed on that occasion, but they are appropriately dressed for this event. And this show is for you if you are dyslexic or if you know someone who is dyslexic. And we always come up with or hear about lots of fantastic positive tips and strategies and useful stuff like that. So it's well worth a listen. And today we have, as you can see, an amazing guest, Will Hayward. And I have prepared one of my legendary introductions, which I have on a piece of paper here, which I'm going to tell you all about Will. And he's going to learn some interesting stuff about himself, perhaps, but hopefully he knows it all. Will is Wales Online's Welsh Affairs editor at Reach PLC. He mainly writes about politics, but actually covers a whole range of different stories. Will came to journalism in his late 20s, working for Wales Online and the Western Mail, and rapidly moved up through the organisation, working as the acting political editor throughout the first year of the COVID pandemic, and subsequently taking the role of the Welsh Affairs editor. Will is a multiply nominated and multiply award-winning journalist, consistently so since 2017. In just 4.5 years, Will has been nominated for 17 journalism awards, winning 5, and is the current Welsh Journalist of the Year, triumphing in no less than 4 out of the 20 available categories at the Wales Media Awards 2022, which is a little bit impressive. He won the overall Journalist of the Year, Feature Writer of the Year, Newspaper Journalist of the Year, and Political Journalist of the Year. And that's not all, because the chairman of the Wales Media Awards judging panel and emeritus editor, what a title, eh? Of the Press Association praised Will's brilliant journalism at a time of national crisis and catastrophe, which spoke up for ordinary people, explored the detail to expose inequalities, and demanded answers from those in power. So, quality stuff. As well as being a regular columnist, Will has recently published his first book assessing how the pandemic affected Wales, completed in just 3 months. Lockdown Wales, How COVID-19 Tested Wales, received widespread plaudits. Will is a regular contributor and commentator for Sky News, BBC News, and Times Radio, as well as a guest speaker at events and literary festivals. He's currently writing his second book, assessing whether Wales should be an independent country, to be published by Biteback in 2022. And Will is dyslexic. So welcome, Will.
Wow, Will's a bit big-headed right now after that.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's so nice to have you here. And wow, what a career behind you. Dyslexic to journalism is one hell of a journey, and I can't wait to hear more about it. So well done, Guy. That was a phenomenal intro, mate.
Well, I've got to ask you, Will, because time is short and these things are important. What qualities do you think those qualities in you were those awards kind of recognizing? Is it literary style? Is it quantity?
I think just journalism is a weird career because I think everyone thinks about journalism as writing and words, and it is how I tell stories. Just going to mute that thing that's just going off in the background. It is words, but if you want to be if you want to write, be a writer. But journalism's a bit different. Journalism, the writing is kind of the final bit. The key part is finding stories, identifying issues, getting people to open up to you, trust you, understand what they're going through. And I actually think dyslexia probably, it makes you quite well placed for using all those skills. You tend to think a bit more outside the box. You tend to approach things in a different way. You tend to perhaps be better at speaking to people and picking up on, social cues more than if you were just really good at just writing. So you do need to be able to write it. You do need to be able to spell, but there's a lot of support you can have to make that work. So I think, and you tend to, see the world in a different way. I think sometimes if you're dyslexic, especially if you've you've grown up having to think of different ways of doing things. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've answered your question. I think I've just gone around the houses a bit, but
something else that we do, mate.
Can I ask you a question, please, Will? Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer?
No. So I didn't really get what journalism was about when I was kind of at school. I just thought I can't write or spell, so I'm not going to do that. I did a politics degree at Cardiff Uni, and then I left uni in 2011, and I started a fitness business. So I did that for 4 or 5 years, and kind of as I started that, I did work in call centres, pubs. I used to work for a company that got kids onto apprenticeships, and then I got to it was 2015. I was 26, and I wasn't enjoying any of it, and I met a guy who works as a journalist and said, "God, that's really interesting. How did you get into that?" And he said, "Oh, I just applied for this master's degree at Cardiff University where you learn your 100 words a minute shorthand and your media law, and you get work experience through it." So I just speculatively applied, and I didn't really realise that Cardiff was actually, along with City in London, is kind of the best place to do your newspaper journalism training. And I got on. I'd started thinking about maybe I wanted to do it because to promote my business, I started doing like blogs on fitness, which did quite well. And so no, I had no idea I wanted to do that until I'd lived a quarter of a century, and then it turns out I really did.
It's brilliant, and I got a question to ask you. So, like for me now, right? Okay, I write. I'm quite severely dyslexic, Will, but I do write, and I'm very creative with my writing. Okay, but it has to be translated. It has to be turned into something that is legible. How? I mean, there's lots of characters of dyslexia. Okay, and this is obviously just one of them that I'm talking about. But how do you take a story that you've created in whatever format, and then before it goes out onto air or out into press, do you have to have someone proofread it and someone go through it to make sure that you haven't left any important commas and apostrophes out?
Yeah, so journalism, there's since as print has declined, there's not as many sub-editors, but there'll always be another pair of eyes that looks at my copy before it goes into the world, whether that's in print or whether it's online. Because of the time pressures that people are under, sometimes my errors might slip through. I mean, what I've actually found is quite useful for me is because when you're writing for like a general audience online, you tend not to actually use that many words that are hard to spell, because you want people to engage with the story. And part of the key part of being a journalist is getting people from a kind of whole range of educational backgrounds to read a story and understand how it applies to them and why it's important that they read it. And actually writing it in a very accessible and simple way is kind of an art form. And so it's kind of worked out perfectly for me. I don't have to write particularly. Most of the words I write are probably about 6 letters long or less, which actually massively helps me. But yeah, someone will always have a read through my copy. My employer wasn't aware that I had dyslexia for the first year. I didn't tell them for the first year, and then now they have known for about 5 years. But I think they do take extra care. But actually, I might spell the same word 2 different ways wrongly in the same piece, and they do keep an eye on that. But I think it's worth it from their point of view. I think make up for it in other ways.
I've got another one there, because like obviously we're all about positivity here, right? And I think it needs to be a shout out for your employers, because you've identified that you're dyslexic, and then they've just gone, yeah, it's cool, we'll just figure it out, and we'll figure out how to do it. And I think that's a massive shout out for your employer, because there's so many employers that don't do that. They shy away from it, they fear it, they worry about it, and yet yours has embraced it and gone, that's all cool, let's just figure out how we do it. I mean, that must spout a hell of a lot of confidence in you.
They are very supportive. The reason I didn't tell them when I first started is because, especially when you start as a trainee, everything you feel very kind of scrutinized, because there's so many different roles in a newsroom, and your editors are trying to work out what you can and can't do and where your strengths are. And I never wanted to kind of be defined by being dyslexic. So I've got a lot of quite good coping mechanisms for it, especially around spelling. But the times that I really worried was when, say, it's a breaking story or it's a legally sensitive story. An editor might come and stand behind me, have my copy in front of me on the screen, and say, "Oh, can you just change that word to this or that word to that?" And that was when I was like, "Oh God," because there's nowhere to hide. So often, I mean, the spell check was like a godsend. But obviously, if they see me typing something completely randomly from their view, that was when I was a bit nervous, and that's why I ended up writing a column, like what it's like to be a dyslexic journalist, and that's kind of how they found out. And then after they did find out, my then mentor sat down with me and said, "Like, what can we do to support you?" And they've been great, and actually, it's they have been really, really supportive. I like to think they'd have done it whether I was good at the job or not, but they have been great, and I can't really kind of praise them highly enough for that.
I love that.
Yeah. The guys usually got some researched answers here.
Well,
researched questions. I can't wait to get them.
I have read Will's column about his dyslexic story online, and it's very eloquent. And and I do dyslexia coaching with people in the workplace, so I hear similar stories quite a lot. And in fact, only yesterday, someone told me about his dyslexia was picked up when he spelled his name wrong. And I know you had that experience with your passport application, and which one would imagine, you would never get wrong. But it's and you mentioned that bit about people standing behind you. And it makes me think, as I was walking the dog earlier today, I was thinking about this, is that the challenge for a lot of people, even if they've had a positive experience, is managing those kind of spotlight moments where suddenly your vulnerability with spelling or whatever it is exposed. And as you say, you don't want to be defined by the dyslexia, which you have no control over. And yet it is highlighted at times like that. And the pressure is on. And that's what I think causes a lot of people to keep quiet about it, not to talk about it, not to disclose it. And then that is really complicated, isn't it, when problems arise, because you've got this kind of hidden thing, what do you do with it? So here's after this long introduction to possibly not even going to be a question, just a statement. But here's the thing. How can we collectively, as a society or for people, make the neurotypical world, people like me, understand the challenges of dyslexia in this kind of positive, embracing, supportive way, rather than judging people by their spelling and memory?
It seems like a weird answer to that question, but I think one of the most important things that can happen is that if you have dyslexia, or if you have any kind of any issue like that, is understanding your condition yourself. Because I think it's a really natural just to go insular and say, "Oh, I don't do that. I can't do that. That's not something I can do. I can't engage with that." And I'm not a very good speller. I'm not going to be. I'm never going to have, my handwriting's always going to look like I'm about 8. But because I've kind of accepted it and I've kind of been curious about it as opposed to scared of it, I think that's allowed me to know what I need in terms of support, and also what I can offer in terms of alternatives, things I am good at. And I think when people own that and people understand that, I think the vast majority of people do want to be supportive and helpful of people with dyslexia, including employers. I know there's lots of examples where people aren't, but I think most do. But they're not necessarily going to be intuitive about it. And the best thing you can do is just be really clear. This is what I can't do. This is where I need help. This is what I kind of offer. This is why I have value. And just really lay it out and be clear. And don't kind of just say, "Oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it." Even if you can't do it, just acknowledge it and just try and understand it, and be very clear and eloquent about what you require in order to bring the many assets you do have to a job or profession.
I'm gonna add to that, because that is a phenomenal answer.
No, I've got something to say, right? Because here's
This
the
is
thing.
important.
Yeah. Okay.
You see how I just get him to submit. But no, I am going to quickly add to it, Guy. I know that you got something good. We'll come over to that now. But I think one of the, and I've always said this, right? One of the biggest problems about understanding is people who create the problem themselves. And I used this example recently. I'm a wheelchair user, and I witnessed a guy building his wheelchair next to his car, and someone said, "Do you want a hand?" And he went, "Well, look like I want a hand. Have I asked you for a hand? Have I asked you to get involved?" And the person who asked literally ran away, right? And the guy looked at me looking for some sort of reassurance to his reaction. And I said, "You know what the problem with that situation was, don't you?" And he said, "Well, yeah, they always think I'm useless." I said, "No." I said, "The problem with that situation was you. That person will now never ask anybody if they need a hand." I said, "And you've created that. You've created that by being ignorant." He didn't like that response, by the way. But I think with dyslexia, it's a hidden disability. And with dyslexia, if someone asks you for a hand or someone asks you a question, tell them the answer. Like, be prepared to share your experiences with that individual, because what that helps is their lack of knowledge. It gives them knowledge. They then gain the skill sets and the knowledge, and that is how we become positive around not just dyslexia, but all neurodiverse conditions. You know, what is wrong with sitting down with someone who's autistic and ask them how that affects them? What's wrong with sitting down with someone with ADHD and saying, "I know you've got ADHD, but how does that actually affect you on a day-to-day life?" And that is how we get rid of that awkward, and we get neurotypical people to understand neurodiversity. We have questions, but we don't frighten them off when they ask the questions. And I think it's about stimulating that confidence. A massive dialogue there. Sorry, Guy. You can take over now, mate. I mean, what do I know?
Thank you. I've got to say, Will, where does your self-confidence come from?
Probably just a bit of an arrogant little bugger, really. I think I've got very encouraging parents, really supportive family. Yeah, it's just always been fairly self-assured. I suppose. I thought I was really. I didn't realize I had dyslexia until I was I was about 6. Because I could read at a really, really young age. My reading is really, really good. I could read very well before I went to school, and then it all just went to hell when I picked up a pen. So maybe the first 6 years I'd managed to get enough innate arrogance to just carry me through.
It's so interesting, isn't it, how different people are, and because there are people with dyslexia who have difficulty reading, aren't there, and those who don't. And I was thinking, reflecting on your all those awards, you must have had to make a little speech for each one of those. And people often say that suddenly when they're put on the spot and they've got to say something, their mind goes blank. So how did you find that experience? Is that something that happens?
Specifically for award ceremonies?
Well, just generally, is it a dyslexic characteristic? I guess you can prepare for an award.
Yeah, I think I've never really struggled with kind of what to say. I mean, my dyslexia really manifested itself, other than kind of spelling and writing, was balance and coordination. My mum always said, as a kid, I used to fall up the stairs. I just used to miss steps. She just didn't know how I was doing it. My shins were just carpet burned from just missing a step and just slipping. But it might have been that because I, especially up until probably year 9 in school, I was very, very nervous about writing. And I think it probably but I felt like I had a lot to say. So it probably became I said everything instead of wanting to type everything or physically write anything. Typing would have been much nicer. So it's I suppose I've never struggled with the speaking side because that's kind of what I've had. That's been my main asset, as it were.
It's so interesting again, isn't it? The variety of characteristics, and and that I know you say in your online piece about the balance and stuff. So that sounds a bit like dyspraxia, doesn't it? And you get a lot of overlap. A lot of people I talk to who've had a diagnosis of dyslexia may also have a diagnosis of ADHD or dyspraxia or dyscalculia. And I think we're in quite early days of the medical world actually understanding this stuff clearly, because I've met someone who was, I may have said this before, when they were child diagnosed with dyspraxia, then later in school with dyslexia, then their doctor diagnosed them with depression as a teenager, then they were diagnosed with autism when as a student, and now a few years on they're being investigated for ADHD. So it is a puzzle, isn't it, trying to make sense of it. And that's a challenge for society, because if you know someone with dyslexia, you might think, oh, yeah, of course, that's what it's like. And actually, that can be completely misleading. So I suppose the moral is, isn't it, we've got to keep our minds open, like journalists. Oh, do you know, I can see a bit of a connection coming here. We've got to find out that individual story and fit in with them. Make no judgments.
Yeah, it's yeah, as you say, I think it took a while to work out what was actually kind of going on with me. My mum's a psychologist, and I think she saw it as a big project for her to get to the bottom of it. So I think I was probably very lucky in that regard, that I had both parents who were very proactive in kind of questioning what was happening. So that was incredibly lucky. But I think we have come I think we've come a long way, and having come a long way, we can see how far we've still got to go.
Well put, and a beautiful way to round off this wonderful interview. Thank you so much, Will, because I know you've got things to do. Jamie and Charlotte obviously putting on their boots ready for Everest. Thanks to them. And join us next time when we talk positively about dyslexia.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone. Have a lovely, lovely time. We will see you back here when we are back from Everest. Will, I want to thank you, mate, for a fantastic interview, and thank you so much for joining us. And Guy, obviously, for just being Guy, you are phenomenal. You're a hero. You know.
I'll put everything into it.
Good luck with your time, guys.
Cheers. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Bye. Bye.